Fleet Commander Gray stood at the bridge of his massive flagship, the Pride of Dominion, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing their target, the Sol system. His tall frame cast a long shadow across the polished floor as he watched the endless stream of data flowing before him. 2,000 warships moved in perfect formation behind his command vessel, each one a testament to the Dominion's power. "Status report," he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of 17 successful conquest campaigns. "All ships report ready, Commander," his second-in-command replied from the control station. "The fleet is in optimal condition. Weapon systems are at full capacity, and shield generators are operating at peak efficiency." Gray allowed himself a small smile. In his 30 years of service to the Stellar Dominion, he had never lost a battle. Each civilization they had encountered had fallen before their might, their planets now serving as resource worlds for the ever-expanding empire. Earth would be no different. The intelligence reports sat in front of him, displaying everything they knew about the human species. They were young, barely beginning to explore their own solar system. Their primitive rockets and satellites cluttered their orbit, and their radio signals still leaked carelessly into space. They hadn't even developed basic faster-than-light travel. "Pathetic," Gray muttered, scrolling through images of Earth's space stations and orbital platforms. "They still use chemical rockets. This won't even qualify as a proper battle." The bridge crew worked silently at their stations, preparing for the jump to Earth's system. They had done this so many times before that it had become routine. Jump in, demand surrender, crush any resistance, and begin the integration process. Some civilizations fought back with everything they had, while others surrendered immediately. It made no difference. The result was always the same. "Commander," one of the sensor operators called out. "Final calculations for the jump are complete. The fleet is awaiting your command." Gray straightened his uniform and walked to the center of the bridge. This was his favorite part, the moment before victory when everything lay before them like a feast waiting to be devoured. The massive view screen showed his fleet stretching out into the darkness of space, each ship a deadly arrow aimed at humanity's heart. "Send the standard pre-jump message to all ships," he ordered. "Remind them of our perfect record. The Dominion has never known defeat, and today will be no different." The message went out, and responses came back immediately. Every ship captain acknowledged, their confidence evident in their quick replies. They had good reason to be confident. Their smallest ship could probably conquer Earth on its own. "Begin the countdown," Gray commanded, clasping his hands behind his back. "Let's show these humans what a real spacefaring civilization looks like." The bridge lights dimmed as power redirected to the jump drives. The massive engines of 2,000 ships spooled up simultaneously, creating a wave of energy that sensors could detect light years away. It was a deliberate show of force, letting the target know exactly what was coming for them. "Jump in 10 seconds, the navigation officer announced. 9, 8, 7. Gray watched the numbers count down, already thinking about how he would word the surrender demand. These humans needed to understand the futility of resistance. Perhaps he would destroy one of their space stations as a demonstration. That usually convinced the stubborn ones. 3, 2, 1. Jump. Reality twisted as the fleet tore a hole through space itself. The stars blurred into streaks of light, and for a brief moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a flash that would have blinded unprotected eyes, the fleet emerged at the edge of the Sol system. Gray looked at the distant yellow star and the tiny blue planet that was their target. Soon, it would be just another conquest, another victory for the Stellar Dominion. He had no way of knowing that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life, and his last. "Begin approach vector," he ordered calmly. "Let's introduce ourselves to our new subjects." The Pride of Dominion slowed as it entered the outer reaches of the Sol system. Fleet Commander Gray watched Earth's image grow larger on the main screen. The blue planet looked peaceful, unaware of the fate that awaited it. Around it, primitive satellites moved in predictable orbits, their radio signals broadcasting carelessly into space. "Prepare the standard surrender message," Gray ordered, settling into his command chair. "Let's see how quickly these humans understand their situation." The message was simple, one they had used many times before. "People of Earth, you are now under the protection of the Stellar Dominion. Surrender your military forces and prepare for integration into our empire. Resistance will result in immediate military action. You have 1 hour to respond." Gray watched as the message was broadcast in all Earth's major languages. The communication officer had to use their primitive radio frequencies since the humans hadn't developed quantum communications yet. At least, that's what they thought. "Message sent, Commander," the officer reported, broadcasting on all their known frequencies. The bridge crew waited, some making quiet bets on how the humans would respond. Most primitive species either panicked or surrendered immediately. A few tried to fight back with their limited weapons, but that never lasted long. The response came faster than expected. "Commander," the communication officer called out, surprise in his voice. "We're receiving a reply. It's very short." "Put it on screen," Gray ordered, expecting to see a terrified human leader begging for mercy. Instead, a single word appeared: "No." Silence fell over the bridge. Gray blinked, unsure if he had read it correctly. In all his years of conquest, he had never received such a brief, direct refusal. "Send the message again," he ordered. Perhaps they didn't understand the gravity of their situation. They waited. Another response came just as quickly. "We understood perfectly. The answer is still no." Gray felt his first twinge of annoyance. He stood up, his tall frame casting a shadow across the bridge. "Very well. It seems these humans need a demonstration. Prepare the first wave of ships. Target one of their larger orbital stations." 500 warships broke formation, moving toward Earth in perfect attack pattern. Their weapons powered up, creating a light show that should have terrified any watching humans. Still no change in their orbital defenses, the sensor operator reported. "We're detecting no military response. They have nowhere near enough weapons in orbit to stop even one of our ships." Gray nodded, satisfied. "They're either foolish or paralyzed with fear. Either way, this will be over quickly. First wave, you may begin your approach." The warships accelerated, their engines glowing brightly against the darkness of space. Earth grew larger in their view screens, its blue oceans and white clouds looking deceptively peaceful. "Sir," the sensor operator called out suddenly, his voice tense, "I'm detecting some strange energy readings from the planet's surface." "What kind of readings?" Gray asked, not particularly concerned. I'm not sure. They're unlike anything in our database. They seem to be coming from multiple points around the globe, but I can't pinpoint the exact locations." Gray frowned. This was unusual, but not concerning. Many species had unique energy signatures. It was probably just their primitive power generation systems. "Continue the approach," he ordered. "Prepare to fire warning shots at their largest space station." The first wave of ships crossed the halfway point to Earth. Still no response from the planet. No desperate pleas, no primitive weapons being launched. Just silence. That's when the sensor operator screamed, "Commander!" Multiple quantum signatures appearing out of nowhere. They're everywhere. Gray rushed to the sensor display, his eyes widening in shock. All around his first wave of ships, thousands of points of light were appearing from empty space, ships materializing out of nothing, surrounding his forces in a perfect three-dimensional grid. They had walked straight into a trap. "Impossible," Gray whispered. "They're supposed to be pre-FTL. They're supposed to be primitive." The human ships, sleek and deadly, hung in space like predators about to strike. And in that moment, Fleet Commander Gray realized he had made a terrible mistake. Fleet Commander Gray's hands gripped the edge of his command console as he stared at the sensor displays. What had seemed like empty space moments ago now blazed with thousands of energy signatures. Human warships surrounded his first wave completely, their designs unlike anything he had ever seen. "How?" he demanded, his voice shaking with rage. "How did we not detect them?" "Unknown, Commander," the sensor officer replied, frantically analyzing the data. "They just appeared. No jump signatures, no warp trails. It's as if they were there all along, invisible to our sensors." The human ships were beautiful in a terrifying way. They had no visible engine ports, no obvious weapon mounts. They looked more like abstract art than warships, their hulls seeming to bend light around them even when visible. "First wave, take defensive positions," Gray ordered. "Power up all shields. Ready main weapons." But before his ships could complete their maneuvers, something even more impossible happened. The space between ships began to ripple, like heat waves over desert sand. More human vessels emerged from these distortions, smaller ones, moving with impossible speed and precision. "Sir, we're detecting energy builds-ups in the human fleet," the weapons officer reported. "But these readings make no sense. Our computers can't even classify what kind of weapons they're charging." Gray watched as his first wave of ships, 500 of the most powerful warships ever built by the Dominion, tried to form a defensive sphere. They looked like children's toys compared to the graceful human vessels now surrounding them. "Send in the second wave," Gray commanded. "We cannot lose our first wave to these primitives." "Commander," his second-in-command spoke quietly beside him, "look at their formation. They're not just surrounding our first wave. They've positioned ships all around our main fleet as well. We're the ones who are trapped." Gray's blood ran cold as he saw the truth of those words. The tactical display showed the horrible reality. Human ships had appeared in perfect positions to engage not just the first wave, but the entire Dominion fleet. They had sprung their trap with devastating efficiency. "Open a channel to their command," Gray ordered. "I want to speak to whoever is in charge of this deception." The communication officer worked at his console, but then shook his head. "Sir, they're not responding to any of our hails. But we are receiving a signal. It's being broadcast to all our ships simultaneously." "Put it through." The message that came through was as short as their first response, but far more chilling. "You were warned." That's when the sensors detected the first human weapon powering up. It started as a subtle vibration, barely noticeable at first. Then the space around one of the human ships began to twist, as if reality itself was being bent. "All ships, open fire," Gray shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "Launch all fighters. Fire everything we have." But it was too late. The human ship's weapon discharged, releasing not energy or projectiles, but what looked like a tear in space itself. The rift moved toward the nearest Dominion warship with deliberate slowness, as if giving them time to appreciate what was about to happen. Evasive maneuvers. The targeted ship's captain screamed over the comm. His ship's engines flared as it tried to move away, but the rift followed, seemingly unaffected by any physical laws the Dominion understood. Gray watched in horror as the rift touched the Dominion warship. There was no explosion, no dramatic destruction. The ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, leaving not even debris behind. Absolute silence fell over the pride of Dominion's bridge. Every crew member stared at their displays, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Their most powerful ships, their strongest shields, meant nothing against this weapon. And all around the fleet, thousands of human ships were powering up similar weapons. "Stars preserve us," Gray whispered. "What have we awakened?" The first human attack ended in seconds, and the real battle began. Fleet Commander Gray watched helplessly as space lit up with weapons he couldn't understand. His mighty armada, which had conquered 17 civilizations, was facing extinction. Multiple ships lost in sectors 7 through 12. The tactical officer shouted, his voice cracking. "Our weapons, they're passing right through their ships. No damage registered." Gray stared at the tactical display, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Human vessels phased in and out of reality, becoming ghostly images whenever Dominion weapons fired at them. Their shields didn't stop attacks. They simply weren't there when the attacks arrived. Launch all remaining fighters, Gray ordered. Spread out the fleet. Don't let them bunch us together. 10,000 Dominion fighters poured from their carrier ships, filling space with their engine trails. They were the pride of the Dominion military, able to outmaneuver any enemy they had ever faced. But against the humans, they looked like clumsy insects trying to fight the wind. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, "the human ships are changing." The sleek human vessels were transforming before their eyes. Sections of hull plating shifted and moved like liquid metal, revealing weapon ports that hadn't been there moments before. Each ship seemed to adapt its shape to whatever attack it was about to launch. A group of human ships surrounded a cluster of Dominion fighters. Their hulls rippled, and suddenly the fighters found themselves trapped in a web of energy. The energy strands didn't destroy the fighters. Instead, their pilots reported that their controls had stopped responding. "They're taking control of our fighters," the fighter command officer reported in disbelief. "Somehow they're reprogramming them through the energy field." Gray watched as his own fighters turned against his fleet, their weapons now enhanced by whatever the humans had done to them. This wasn't just advanced technology. This was like magic from ancient stories. "Status report," Gray demanded, though he already knew how bad it was. "We've lost 30% of the fleet," his second-in-command reported grimly. "The humans are. They're hurting us, Commander. Every time we try to retreat, they cut off our escape routes. They're forcing us into smaller and smaller spaces." The pride of Dominion shuddered as a human weapon grazed its shields. Unlike the reality-erasing rifts they'd seen earlier, this was pure energy, but energy like nothing their sensors could categorize. The shield strength dropped by half from that single glancing hit. "Look!" someone shouted, pointing at the main view screen. A massive human vessel was decloaking directly ahead of them. It dwarfed the pride of Dominion, making their flagship look like a shuttle in comparison. Its hull was covered in shifting patterns of light, like a living aurora in space. Perhaps we can surrender," one of the bridge officers suggested quietly. But before Gray could respond, the massive human ship began to move. Its entire surface seemed to come alive, countless smaller ships separating from its hull. What they had thought was a single vessel was actually a carrier, made up of thousands of smaller craft held together in some impossible way. "All ships, evasive action," Gray shouted. "Emergency jumps. Get us out of here." But the humans had thought of that too. Every time a Dominion ship tried to power up its jump drive, localized gravity distortions prevented the jump fields from forming. They were trapped in normal space, being picked apart by an enemy they couldn't even hit. "Commander," the tactical officer said, his voice now eerily calm, "I think I understand now. Every time we've attacked, every maneuver we've tried, they knew what we would do before we did it. They're not just more advanced. They'd studied us. They knew exactly how we would fight." Gray sank into his command chair as the truth hit him. The humans hadn't been primitive at all. They had been watching, learning, preparing. Every scrap of intelligence the Dominion had about Earth had been exactly what the humans wanted them to see. And now, they were showing the galaxy's greatest military power what true advanced warfare looked like. "Fire everything," Fleet Commander Gray roared, his composed demeanor finally cracking. "All ships, fire every weapon you have. Don't hold anything back." The remaining Dominion ships unleashed their full arsenal. Plasma torpedoes, quantum missiles, particle beams, and gravitational weapons lit up space like 1,000 dying stars. It was enough firepower to crack a planet's crust, a desperate final act from a dying fleet. The human ships didn't even try to dodge. Instead, the massive barrage of weapons passed harmlessly through their hulls, as if the human vessels existed in a different dimension. Some of the Dominion's own weapons even curved back toward them, caught in some kind of advanced reflection field. "Impossible," The weapons officer whispered. Our targeting systems show direct hits, but it's like shooting at ghosts. The Pride of Dominion shook violently as another human attack struck them. This time, the hit caused all gravity systems to fail. Crew members floated from their stations as emergency magnetic boots activated. The mighty flagship systems were being stripped away one by one. Engineering reports critical damage. The damage control officer shouted. They're not destroying our ships, Commander. They're disassembling them. Some kind of advanced nanite weapon is taking our vessels apart piece by piece. Through the main viewport, Gray watched in horror as one of his heavy cruisers literally came apart at the seams. Pieces of hull plating separated cleanly, systems shut down in sequence, and the crew pods were carefully extracted before the rest of the ship was reduced to its base components. They're salvaging our ships, his second-in-command realized. This isn't just a battle. It's a harvest. Gray slammed his fist on his command console. Deploy the forbidden weapons. Authorization code Gray Alpha 7. His officers looked at him in shock. The forbidden weapons were planet killers, capable of destroying entire solar systems. Using them this close to their own fleet was suicide. Do it, Gray screamed. Better to die than face this humiliation. 5 Dominion ships separated from the fleet, their hulls splitting open to reveal weapons that glowed with dark energy. These were the Empire's last resort, weapons that violated every treaty they had ever signed. The forbidden weapons fired, sending waves of destructive energy that should have torn reality itself apart. For a moment, space itself seemed to scream in protest. Then something even more incredible happened. The human ships near the blasts began to spin, their hulls transforming into complex geometric patterns. The forbidden weapon energy was caught in these patterns, channeled and redirected like water in a drain. The humans weren't just defending against the weapons. They were collecting the energy. They're using our attack to power their ships, the sensor officer reported, his voice barely a whisper. Power readings from human vessels are increasing exponentially. Whatever we throw at them just makes them stronger. A new message flashed across all Dominion screens. These weapons are inefficient. Allow us to demonstrate proper energy manipulation. The human ships that had absorbed the forbidden weapon energy began to glow with a light that hurt to look at. Their hulls became like liquid metal, flowing into new forms that defied description. All remaining ships, form up around the flagship. Gray ordered, knowing it was futile but unable to simply surrender. Concentrate all power on shields. But the shields meant nothing. The human vessels released the absorbed energy in a controlled wave that passed through the Dominion fleet like sunlight through glass. As it passed, ships simply stopped working. Not destroyed, not torn apart, but completely powered down. The Pride of Dominion's bridge went dark, emergency lights casting red shadows across terrified faces. Only the main viewport still worked, giving them a clear view of their defeat. Status report, Gray whispered into the darkness. 70% of the fleet is either destroyed or disabled. His second-in-command replied quietly. The rest are being systematically taken apart. We've lost. Commander, we never stood a chance. Gray stared out at the human fleet, their ships now moving with casual grace through the wreckage of his once mighty armada. He had one last card to play, but looking at the technological gap between them, he knew it would be pointless. The humans hadn't just beaten them. They had rendered the entire Dominion military obsolete in a single battle. Fleet Commander Gray stood in the dimly lit bridge of the Pride of Dominion, watching his fleet die. Emergency power kept basic systems running, but they were helpless, floating in space like children's toys scattered by an angry giant. Get weapons back online, he ordered, though he knew it was useless. Reroute power from life support if you have to. Sir, his second-in-command spoke softly. We just lost contact with the last battle group. The humans. They're not even destroying our ships anymore. They're simply shutting them down and collecting them. Through the viewport, Gray watched human ships methodically moving through his fleet's remains. They worked with terrifying efficiency, gathering disabled Dominion vessels into neat clusters, like a gardener organizing fallen leaves. "Commander," the sensor officer called out suddenly. "One of our captured ships. They're taking it apart, but not like before. They're studying it, scanning every component. I think they're learning our technology." Gray felt a chill run down his spine. The humans weren't just defeating them. They were analyzing their technology in real time, probably finding ways to improve upon it even as they fought. A new ship appeared near the Pride of Dominion, decloaking so close they could see every detail of its impossible hull. It was smaller than the others, but something about it radiated authority. The bridge crew watched in silence as it approached. "They're sending a message," a communication officer reported. "Audio only." "Play it," Gray ordered, his voice hoarse. A calm human voice filled the bridge. "Your technology is primitive but interesting. We will preserve samples for our museums. Your crews will be treated well and returned to your space. Remember this lesson." The message hit Gray like a physical blow. They weren't even worth keeping as enemies. They were being treated like an archaeological find, their mighty fleet nothing more than specimens to be studied and displayed. "Sir," the tactical officer called out, "you need to see this." The main screen flickered to life, showing a view of Earth. The image made Gray's breath catch in his throat. Massive structures were appearing in orbit, emerging from whatever dimensional space the humans used to hide their true civilization. Space stations larger than cities, shipyards that could build fleets bigger than the Dominion's entire navy, defense platforms that made their most powerful weapons look like toys. This was never their homeworld defense, his second-in-command realized. This was just their rapid response force, a tiny fraction of their actual military. As if to confirm this, new ships began emerging from the orbital structures. These vessels made the ones that had defeated them look obsolete in comparison. They moved in ways that suggested complete mastery over gravity, space, and time itself. "Commander," the sensor officer reported, his voice shaking, "these readings, the energy output from just one of those new ships exceeds our entire fleet's combined power." Gray watched as more and more of humanity's true military might revealed itself. It was like watching a giant slowly rise from slumber, each movement revealing more of its terrifying scale. "Send out the surrender signal," Gray ordered quietly, "to all remaining ships. There's nothing more we can do." The Pride of Dominion's communication array broadcast one final message to the scattered remains of the fleet. "All ships, this is Fleet Commander Gray. The battle is over. Power down weapons and prepare for boarding. Do not resist." As the surrender messages were acknowledged one by one, Gray turned to his crew. Their faces showed a mixture of fear, awe, and relief. They had come expecting an easy conquest of primitives. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant. "How?" one of the bridge officers asked no one in particular. "How did we not know? How did they hide all of this?" Gray knew the answer, but it was too terrifying to speak aloud. The humans hadn't just hidden their true nature. They had masterfully crafted the illusion of weakness, waiting to see who would be foolish enough to test them. And the Dominion had walked right into their trap. Fleet Commander Gray sat alone in his quarters aboard the Pride of Dominion, recording his final message to the Dominion Council. The ship's emergency lights cast a dim red glow across his face, making him look older than his years. Outside, human ships continued their methodical collection of his defeated fleet. "To the High Council of the Stellar Dominion," he began, his voice heavy with the weight of what he had to say. "I record this message not as an excuse for failure, but as a warning for the future of our empire." He paused, watching through his quarters viewport as another human ship passed by, its hull rippling with impossible technology. They had left his flagship's communication systems working deliberately, wanting his message to reach his superiors. "Everything we knew about Earth was wrong." "No, that's not accurate. Everything we knew about Earth was exactly what they wanted us to know. We didn't find them. They were watching us, studying us, waiting to see what we would do. Gray's hands trembled slightly as he continued. Their technology is beyond anything we could have imagined. They don't just have cloaking devices. They can shift entire fleets between dimensions. Their weapons don't just destroy. They can take apart our ships piece by piece, or simply shut them down with a thought. A distant explosion caught his eye. One of his ships had tried to self-destruct rather than be captured. The humans contained the explosion in some kind of energy field, compressing it until it winked out of existence. We lost over 2,000 ships in less than 10 minutes. But that's not the truly terrifying part, Gray continued. They weren't even fighting us with their main fleet. What we encountered was merely their rapid response force, a tiny fraction of their true military might. He pulled up an image on his screen, showing the massive orbital structures that had appeared around Earth, their actual capabilities. I lack the words to describe them. They have structures in orbit that could house our entire fleet. Ships that could probably conquer our empire single-handedly. Technology that makes our most advanced weapons look like children's toys. Gray's voice grew more urgent. The humans are not pre-FTL primitives. They are not some young species ready for conquest. They are our technological superiors in every way. And they have been watching us, waiting to see if we would be foolish enough to attack them. Another pause as he gathered his thoughts. The war is over before it truly began, but they are being merciful. They're keeping samples of our ships for their museums. Yes, museums, and returning our crews unharmed. They see us not as enemies to be destroyed, but as primitive curiosities to be studied. Through his viewport, Gray could see more human ships appearing, each one more impressive than the last. To any who receive this message, heed my words. Do not attempt to challenge Earth. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness. What we saw today was a species so far beyond us that they don't even see us as a threat. A soft beeping indicated the human ships were beginning their final approach to the Pride of Dominion. Gray straightened in his chair, determined to maintain dignity in his final moments as commander. The humans asked me to pass on a message to the Council, he said. They said, "Your empire has potential, but you must learn wisdom before power. We will be watching." Gray looked directly into the recording device. This is my final report as fleet commander. Learn from our mistake. The humans could have destroyed us utterly, but they chose to teach us a lesson instead. We should be grateful for their mercy. He could hear movement in the corridors now. The humans had begun boarding his ship. Their footsteps made no sound, but he could feel their presence. One last thing, Gray added quickly. In all our records of conquest, all our battles across the stars, we have never encountered anything like them. They are not just another species to be added to the Empire. They are what we thought we were, masters of space and time itself. The door to his quarters began to open. Gray sat up straighter, facing his fate. This is Fleet Commander Gray, signing off for the last time. Remember my words. Remember this day. And above all, never challenge Earth again.